Welcome to Divine Therapy Incorporated. Before we begin, I invite you to settle into your space. Adjust your posture so that you are supported and comfortable. Take a deep, intentional breath through your nose, hold it for a moment, and let it out slowly through your mouth. Today, we are going on a journey of patience and rediscovery. This is the story of Leo, a man who lost his sight of the world's beauty, and the long, winding path he took to find it again. We share this story for anyone who currently feels as though their world has turned to shadow. We want you to know that while the light may seem gone, it is merely waiting for you to find it. In a quiet city nestled beside a great, winding river, there lived a man named Leo. Leo was an artist who did not just see color, he felt it. To him, the world was a living symphony of vibrant hues and brilliant saturation. When the sun rose in the morning, Leo did not just see a yellow sky. He saw an explosion of amber, honey, and liquid gold that warmed his very skin. He could spend hours watching the deep emerald leaves of the oak trees that danced against a cobalt blue sky that felt as deep as the ocean. Every street corner he passed was a vivid mosaic of ruby reds, electric oranges, and luminous violets. Leo's life was a sanctuary of chromatic joy and intense pigment. In his studio, canvases were layered with thick, brilliant paints that seemed to glow with their own internal light. He spent his days chasing the neon glow of the city at night and the delicate, fragile pastel pinks of cherry blossoms in the spring. He believed with his whole heart that color was the primary language of the soul. He believed that as long as the world remained bright and high in contrast, his heart would remain full and his spirit would be safe. To Leo, a life without radiant hues and glowing tones was not a life at all. He walked through the world with a constant bounce in his step, his eyes always darting from one shimmering reflection to another, catching the vivid contrast of a bright red umbrella against the dark, wet bricks of a city street. But then, a shadow began to stretch across the landscape of Leo's life. It was not a sudden darkness, but a slow and creeping desaturation. It began with the muted tones of an autumn that seemed to stay long after the winter had arrived. One morning, Leo woke up and looked at his favorite coffee mug, which was a vibrant scarlet. To his surprise, it looked a bit faded and dull, as if it were an old photograph left out in the sun for too many years. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was just the foggy morning mist or a hazy, dim light from the overcast sky. He told himself he was just tired, that his eyes were playing tricks on him. But as the days passed, the lack of clarity persisted. Week by week, the saturation of his entire world began to leak away. The once bright sapphire ocean turned to a dull slate gray. The lush, vibrant green forests he loved to paint became ashen and dusty and pale. It felt as though a translucent veil of thick fog had been draped over his eyes, and no matter how much he blinked, it would not go away. This was the work of the color thief. The color thief is a silent, invisible force that slowly siphons the energy from our very perception. It is the heavy weight of depression that turns a vibrant masterpiece into a hollow, unfinished sketch. It does not take everything at once, it takes the world from you shade by shade, until you are left in the dark. Leo tried to fight back with everything he had. He went to the art supply store and bought the most intense neon paints and the most glowing, expensive pigments he could find. He went back to his studio and began to throw paint at his canvases, hoping to force the vividness back into his reality. But a strange and terrifying thing happened. Even the brightest, most electric pigments looked pale and chalky and washed out when they hit the canvas. The vibrant world he loved was being replaced by a monochrome landscape of endless shadows. The brilliant sun, which used to feel like a warm embrace, now felt like a cold white disk hanging in a leaden, unresponsive sky. As the external colors vanished, the internal fire of his passion began to flicker and die. Eventually, the thief took everything. Leo's world became a complete monochrome experience. He felt as though he were living inside a black and white film from another century, where everything was merely a shade of charcoal or silver or obsidian. He would go for walks in the park, but where there used to be vibrant flowers and green grass, he saw only gray husks and colorless, brittle weeds. The people passing by him were nothing more than shadowy figures in dark, colorless coats, their faces blending into the gray cement of the sidewalks. He could no longer see the blush in a child's cheek or the blue in a friend's eyes. This total lack of color created a heavy and suffocating atmosphere of gloom that followed him everywhere. Without the visual stimulation of hue, Leo's mind became a foggy chamber of silence and stillness. He felt heavy in his limbs, as if his bones were made of lead. He became motionless, sitting for hours in a chair without even realizing the time was passing. This is the deep, silent valley of the soul, a place where the vibrancy of life feels like a distant, impossible memory. He stopped painting entirely. His brushes sat in dusty jars, their bristles becoming stiff and useless. His studio, which was once a riot of light and energy, became a gray cell filled with shadows and accumulated dust. He spent his days staring at the ashen walls of his apartment, feeling the cold, neutral emptiness of his own existence. The absence of color was far more than just a visual change, it was a profound emotional void. He felt numb and desaturated and hollowed out. He was a gray man living in a gray room, waiting for a gray end. He forgot what it felt like to be warm. He forgot the aggressive energy of red, the hopeful spark of yellow, or the deep, resting peace of blue. Everything was just gray, over and over again, in a cycle that seemed like it would never break. He stopped looking out the window. He stopped talking to his friends. He simply existed in the monochrome quiet. One afternoon, Leo was sitting at his kitchen table in the dim and colorless light of the late afternoon. He was staring at nothing in particular when he noticed a faded wooden chair in the corner of the room. For many months, that chair had been nothing more than a gray shape, a blurred object in his peripheral vision. But today, a tiny sliver of pale light managed to break through the clouds and hit the wood at just the right angle. As he looked at it, he saw a whisper of brown. It was not a vivid brown. It was not a rich or deep brown. It was almost invisible to the naked eye. It was a sepia tint, a tiny hint of tan hidden deep within the gray grain of the old wood. Leo leaned forward. He stared at that tiny patch of wood for a long time. That small hint of warmth felt like a miracle, like finding a single drop of water in a vast, dry desert. He did not try to make it brighter. He did not run to get his paints to highlight it. He did not try to force it to be more than it was. He simply sat there and acknowledged that it was there. He whispered to the quiet, empty room that the color was not gone. It was just resting. It was waiting beneath the surface, hiding from the thief. This realization was the first crack in the gray wall. The next day, Leo decided to go outside. He did not go to the park to look for a rainbow. He was not ready for that yet. He went out into the monochrome city simply looking for a trace, a single pixel of life. He walked slowly, his eyes fixed on the ground. After a few blocks, he found a faint and dusty rose color on a discarded brick in a construction site. A few minutes later, he found a pale and watery blue reflecting in a frozen puddle on the sidewalk. These were not the saturated colors he used to love. They were muted and subtle and fragile. But to Leo, in his state of desaturation, they were luminous and precious beyond words. He realized in that moment that the color thief was a liar. The thief did not actually steal the colors of the world, it just taught him to stop looking for them. Depression makes us look at the entire gray sky and conclude that the sun is gone forever, instead of searching for the one tiny and pale star that is still shining behind the clouds. Leo decided then and there to change his focus. He stopped being an artist of the grand and the vivid, and he became an explorer of the subtle spectrum. He became a seeker of the quiet tones that most people ignore. Leo returned to his studio that evening. He did not reach for his neon paints or his bright jars of primary colors. Instead, he took a tube of soft, pale white and added a tiny, microscopic drop of ochre. He began to paint a faint and cream-colored line on a gray canvas. It was the first stroke he had made in a year. It felt like a heartbeat on the fabric. He did not try to paint a masterpiece. He simply painted that one color over and over, until he could feel it in his hands. He began to practice what he called the art of noticing. He would spend 20 minutes every morning looking at the subtle and pearlescent shades of a single seashell he kept on his desk. He would go outside at dusk and notice the soft lavender shadows that fell across the snow. He began to look for the warmth in people's voices since he could not yet see it in their faces. As he honored these quiet and muted colors, his own internal light began to grow. It was a slow process, almost invisible to anyone else. His leaden limbs began to feel a little lighter. The heavy, suffocating fog in his mind began to thin out, turning into a soft morning mist that he could finally see through. He realized that healing is not a vivid explosion or a sudden return to perfection. It is a gradual brightening of the soul. It is the slow transition from black and white to sepia, then to pastel, and finally, after much time and patience, back to vibrant life. He started to water his plants, noticing the pale green veins in their leaves. He started to wear a soft blue scarf, enjoying the way the fabric felt against his neck. He was inviting the spectrum back into his life, one gentle shade at a time, without any pressure to be fast or to be bright. Weeks turned into months, and the colors grew stronger. They did not rush back, they returned like the tide, inch by inch. Then, one morning, the miracle finally arrived in full. It was not a bolt of lightning or a loud crash. It was a clear and crisp sunrise that broke over the horizon with a clarity he had forgotten existed. As the golden light flooded into his bedroom, Leo looked at his window. A ladybug had landed on the outside of the glass. It was a vivid and brilliant scarlet. It was so bright and so intense that it almost hurt his eyes to look at it. This time, he did not look away. He did not blink or try to shield his vision. He let the intense red wash over him like a wave of pure heat. And then, like a dam breaking after a long winter, the vibrancy returned to the entire world at once. He looked out his window and saw the deep and lush green of the trees in the park. He saw the brilliant sapphire blue of the river winding its way through the valley. The colorless veil that had haunted him for so long finally snapped and dissolved into the morning air. Leo grabbed his palette with shaking hands. He felt a surge of energy he had not felt since he was a young man. He did not paint muted tones anymore. He reached for his fiery crimsons and his electric turquoises and his sunny, radiant yellows. But as he began to paint, he realized he was painting differently than before. He did not just paint the bright lights and the easy colors. He painted the subtle shadows too. He painted the grays and the sepias and the muted tones he had discovered in the dark. He knew now that the gray was not the enemy. The gray was part of the story. It was the background that made the colors shine even brighter. It was the shadow that gave the light its depth. If you are watching this today, and your world feels monochrome and gray, please listen to me very closely. The color thief is a season, not a permanent state of being. You may feel desaturated and hollow right now. You may feel like the vibrancy of your joy has been stolen and will never return to your heart. You may feel like you are trapped in a black and white world while everyone else is living in color. But at Divine Therapy Incorporated, we know the truth of your spirit. We know that the colors are still there. They are not gone, they are simply hidden in the gray grain of your life, waiting for you to have the courage to notice them. You do not have to find the vivid rainbow today. You do not have to be perfect, and you do not have to be bright. You just have to find one pale hint of warmth in the cold. You just have to find one sliver of brown in the wood. Look for the soft brown in the wood of your door. Look for the faint blue in the morning clouds. Honor the muted shades of your journey, for they are just as important as the bright ones. As you notice the small things, the saturation will slowly and surely return to your soul. Your internal fire is not out. It has not been extinguished by the thief. It is merely an ember, glowing quietly in the dark, waiting for the gentle breath of hope to catch. You are a masterpiece in progress. You are a canvas of infinite potential and incredible beauty. The vibrant and technicolor life you deserve is waiting for you, one subtle shade at a time. Take a deep and radiant breath. Feel the life moving within you. The light is coming back. The gray is fading away into the past. Your vivid and colorful future is beginning right now, in this very moment of noticing. Thank you for walking this colorful path with us. You are not alone on this journey. You are seen by us. You are valued by the world. And you are more brilliant than you can possibly imagine. Keep looking for the light, no matter how small it may seem. It is always there, and it is always yours.